It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Charlie so much for extending the invitation for me to get outside of the Dallas DFW area and present to this group up in Philadelphia. I wanted to start with a little bit of an origin story about this presentation. As Charlie mentioned, I'm a marketer who's in job transition. I am not a coding expert or a machine language guru or a Python enabled programmer. What I am is a global marketer. And in my capacity as a global marketer, I have always been asked by the companies I've worked for, like Unilever or Mary Kay or Avon, to look into my crystal ball and to understand what are the technologies and the trends that are going to be shaping the way that consumers are interacting with my company, with my brand, and with my product. And artificial intelligence was one of those trends that I could see coming down the tracks like a train. Well, I couldn't actually see the train, but I could see the smoke coming. And I knew that it was going to be in the station soon and that I needed to learn as much about it as I could because it was going to change the way that I worked. It was going to change the way my company worked. And very importantly, as a manager who managed young teams, it was going to be changing the way that the younger workforce was working in the future. So I began to immerse myself into the emerging technologies of the time. This is going back 2 years ago. So technologies like Stable Diffusion. And then all of a sudden, there was this explosion of large language models that started in November 2022. ChatGPT was kind of a seminal moment for all of us. And it was a tool that I was an early adopter for and began to understand how I could utilize that in my professional world and in my job search. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. I'm actually going to be taking you through a bit of education that's really geared towards new users to the technology, or maybe those that have dipped their toe in the water and they haven't yet really gotten the results that they want from it. I'll be demonstrating some of the practical applications, but also some of the limitations that you need to be aware of where the technology is right now. We'll spend a bit of time talking about tips for prompt creation. This is how you're going to interface with the large language model to get out exactly what you need. And not to worry, I know you're all probably trying to take photographs of the screen or taking notes. At the end of this, I'm going to provide you with a link that's actually going to let you download a prompt template that has almost all of the prompts that you're seeing today. You'll be able to cut and paste those right away. As I said, I'm not a coding guru. Everything that I'm going to show you today is something that everyone on this call should be able to do and integrate into their own tech stack going forward. So I want to start with a quick poll, and if I could ask you to do a quick self-assessment and put what you think your own level is. Everything from a level 1 where you're a complete novice, you know nothing about generative AI, to a level 5 where you're an experienced enthusiast. And what I like to do is I do this because I want to understand how the market is shifting over time. I'm definitely seeing changes. I've been teaching this course now for more than 15 months and have taught thousands of people at this point. And so I'm seeing the learning curve change, but there are still a lot of people that are first timers with ChatGPT. In fact, the stats show that at this point, April of 2024, only about 53% of Americans have ever used generative technology. And what's interesting is that we see that the usage tends to drop significantly with age. So we know the younger people are using it, college students, high school students using it for writing papers. But when people hit their 40s or hit their 50s, those numbers start to drop off. The other thing we know is that most folks are still primarily using it for entertainment versus for productivity. And so I'm hoping by the end of today's presentation, you're going to see some applications of how it can save you some time and potentially money in what you're doing, both in your personal and professional life. Today's agenda, we're kind of broken into three different sections here. Part one, I'm going to be talking about the evolution of artificial intelligence and specifically large language models. And we'll take a kind of a close look at how these models work so that you understand them on a fundamental level. We're also going to take a look at the current language models that are out there, the popular ones. There are more and more every day. And although they're similar, there are some differences in the features and their limitations that you should be aware of. And perhaps by the end of today, you'll decide not that you need a single tool, but that you might have a couple of different tools in your toolbox. Part two is when we dive into prompt creation, and I'm going to talk about the 6 components of what I think help you craft a great prompt. Then we're going to take that and actually break those down into some practical examples and application that you can use. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about customization and how you can get the models not only to give you the answers that you want, but to write them in a style, tone, and voice that reflects something that's more personalized to you rather than generic to AI. In part three, we're going to take a quick look at some of the more advanced features that are available in tools like ChatGPT Plus. These are paid tools that are out there that not everybody's going to have, but it's good for you to understand what is kind of the cutting edge of these tools and where they're going. Also, something called retrieval augmented generation, which allows you to essentially train your own GPT. You don't need any coding. You don't need to be a programmer. You can create them on your own custom data with some of these premium features. So a couple of caveats that I like to share. First of all, this technology is evolving and changing quickly. And what that means is your experience and interface is going to evolve as well. The answers you get out might not be exactly the same as the ones that you're going to see today. And it's also important for you to know that over time, they're going to change as well. So having used this technology for over 18 months, I can tell you what it does now is very different than what it did 18 months ago. In fact, every time I do this presentation, I have to check to make sure that the prompts are still working and functioning correctly. Secondly, if you are in a job and working on an enterprise system, please consult your corporate IT department so that you can understand their guidelines. We don't want you getting into trouble. We certainly don't want your company having any exposure by having any of their data out there or any security issues. So generative AI, is it really anything new? Well, believe it or not, chatbots are probably older than most of us on this phone call. In fact, the very first ones came out back in 1966. MIT released a chatbot called Eliza. And some of us on this call are probably old enough to remember IBM's Deep Blue computer that actually beat a grand chess champion back in the 90s. And then IBM came back with another computer, Watson, in 2011 and put it on Jeopardy, and it was able to beat the contestants there. But for the most part, AI's been kind of flying underneath the radar screen. We've all been using it. It's been in things like our autocomplete on our phone, or the algorithm where Amazon is suggesting products for us to look at. But we haven't really thought about it in a major way. We've been very focused on products like blockchain and the metaverse. That really is until about 2 years ago. In November of 2022, there was really a breakthrough moment. And I want to talk about what led up to that breakthrough moment by looking at what was happening in 2021. There was the equivalent of a great space race that was happening around the world. In fact, there were more than 24 large models that were in development at one time. And as you look at this chart, I'm sure you're seeing some logos that you recognize, some flags that you expected to be up there, but maybe some that you don't recognize or that you weren't expecting. And so it's important to remember that, this is a space race that's happening all around the world, from China to Russia to South Korea to Canada to Israel, and yes, of course, Silicon Valley. Now, in this space race, normally the first person to the moon gets to plant their flag, and that flag was planted by a little company known as OpenAI and a product called ChatGPT. And you're going to hear me reference ChatGPT in most of what I'm talking about today. That is because it is the dominant platform that is out there being used by most of the world. Having said that, almost all of the prompts you're going to see today and the fundamentals of this are going to be applicable to other tools that are out there, whether that's Google's Gemini or Anthropic's Claude 3. So to begin with, I thought I would do a job interview with ChatGPT. And so I asked it to give me its 30-second elevator speech, telling me who it is, what it does, and how it helps. And I asked it to do that in simple language so that it didn't write me a phone book. And so you see this definition in front of you on the screen. It uses artificial intelligence and natural language processing to generate human-like responses to user inputs based on patterns and associations learned from vast amounts of text data. So how much text data? Well, the free version of ChatGPT 3.5 has been estimated to be trained on more than 300 billion artifacts. And GPT-4, which is the latest model, is over 1 trillion. They're not telling us exactly how many, but it's supposed to be over 1 trillion. So maybe an easier way to think about this is, imagine you were sitting across the desk from the world's best personal assistant. This personal assistant has been trained on every New York Times article, every Reddit thread, every encyclopedia in 40 different languages, basically the breadth and the depth of the internet prior to its training date. And that this tool can interact, this assistant can interact with you almost in a conversational way, like any other assistant might. Not like Siri, where it's been programmed to answer a very specific question, but in a very conversational way. And so let's talk a little bit how it is doing that. It's actually got these neural paths that are a bit like your brain. And so to demonstrate that, I want to ask you a question. I want you to complete this sentence for me. My favorite sandwich is peanut butter and... So without me even completing the sentence, your brain has already gone to your word cloud, gone to your neural network, and it is put together that peanut butter and jelly is my favorite sandwich, right? And so much in the same way, the tool has this large word cloud that it is able to go to, and this path of these neural networks that it taps into. And so let's play a game here. And what I would like you to do is look at the words that are in this green section here. We've got 7 of them: the, rainbow, swimming, elusive, crying, adjusted, clouds. And what we're going to try and do is pretend that we're the LLM, and we're going to go through these 4 examples and figure out which word we're going to use. So for example number 1, we have no context, right? We've given it no information. And so it has to make a choice. And so in the chat, what I'd like you to do is put the word that you think it's going to pick for number 1, right? And so the answer to that actually is, it's going to know algorithmically that most likely a sentence will begin with the word the. And so it's assigned an algorithmic score, and it's choosing that as the most likely word to go with. Now, in question number 2, we've got a little bit more information. The bass was, we have 3 words, And it maybe could have gone a couple of different directions, right? The bass was elusive. Yes, it could be that, but it knew that it was more likely, more probable that it was going to be the bass swimming. So now in example 3, we still have the bass was, but we've given it even more context with a preceding sentence. Fishing is so unpredictable. The bass was, in this case, elusive. And as we get to number 4, turn it up, the bass was, well, believe it or not, the tool actually knows that bass is a homophone and that that's actually bass. The bass was adjusted too high. So you can start to get an understanding of the importance of giving it information and giving it context so that those neural pathways can be established and it can make the right decision. So if we look at how the model works, that big word cloud is at the very top, that model training data, that 300 billion artifacts that are there. And the model starts to generate these initial responses. But before you ever see it, it actually goes through a training process with, believe it or not, human beings. This is a process called reinforced learning from human feedback. And they give the tool basically a thumbs up or thumbs down on how the response goes. So if it says my favorite sandwich is peanut butter and jelly, it may assign a score of 10. If it says my favorite sandwich is peanut butter and banana, maybe it's a little lower. Maybe it's a 6 or 7. And if it comes back and says my favorite sandwich is peanut butter and kimchi, it's probably getting a 1. So there's a bit of classical conditioning that's happening here where the model gets optimized. And then when we see the final response, we actually play a role as well, because we get the chance to provide it input as to whether it was good, whether it was bad, what was good about that. And that feeds back into that master model training data. And so it's adaptive and it's continuing to learn. And that's part of the reason I say these models are changing and will work differently as time goes on. So a couple of limitations that everyone's been running into. First of all, it may occasionally generate incorrect information. Why is it doing that? Well, I said it's been trained on the breadth and the depth of the internet. We know how perfect the internet is and that there's no bad information on the internet at all. Well, it's drawing upon that and occasionally producing bad information. That is getting less and less as these models improve. But one of the other things it may occasionally do is provide harmful instruction or biased content. There's this great story back in February of last year when Google Bard, or excuse me, Microsoft Bing first launched. A Microsoft tool kind of went haywire, and a New York Times editor had a chatbot that was telling him to divorce his wife. She was being unfaithful, and to start a relationship with the chatbot. So those kind of things are happening less and less these days, but you may run into that. Last and most importantly is it will have limited knowledge of the world after its training date. And so in some cases, these training dates may be a couple of years old. And so if you're looking for more recent information, whether it's on sales of a company, or political happenings that might have happened last month, there is the strong possibility that the model is not going to have this kind of information. And we'll see some examples of that today. So there are tools like ChatGPT Plus that have the ability to search the internet for more current content. So some of the tools that we're going to look at today can augment the training data with web search to get you to more current information. How can you access ChatGPT? 2 ways, and I recommend actually both of them for you. First of all, you can go to chat.openai.com and get a desktop or laptop version. These days, you don't even really have to register. They've made it sort of anonymous if you want to. So if you're concerned about your data and it being associated with you, there's a way to kind of get the information and use the tool anonymously. The other thing you can do is download the app from the app stores. And the reason I like this is that it has a conversational element to it. It's got voice recognition, both on the input and the output. And so you can actually have a conversation and use this as a great learning tool. I go on a walk every day, and so while I'm out on my walk, I might ask it to train me on the wines of the Rhone Valley. And it will train me, and then I can ask it to test me question by question on what it's trained me on. And so I can do that without ever reading a screen and just interacting verbally with it. So both are great options. Both are completely free. Let's talk a little bit about adoption and what's been happening. As I mentioned, 54% of people now have used it. It's been one of the fastest adopted technologies out there. And if we put it in context to history, we can see it took Netflix almost 3.5 years to get up to 1 million users. Even Facebook, the world's largest social media platform, it took them 10 months to get to 1 million users. ChatGPT, 5 days. And by February, 2 months after it had launched, it was up to 1 billion visits per month. We're going to take a look at traffic in a few more slides. I think these days it's roughly about 1.6, 1.7 billion visits every month that's happening. Which platform to use? We're going to take a look at 5 different ones. And on this first slide here, I've put them all together because essentially they are all utilizing the same engine underneath the hood. And that is a model produced by OpenAI. It's either 3.5, GPT 3.5, or GPT-4. So starting on the left, we have Microsoft. Microsoft is a minority shareholder within OpenAI. I think they own 49% of the company. And through that, they got access to the model to integrate to their search engine, Bing. The great thing about Bing, it's free. It's voice or text input, even on your laptop or desktop, so you can talk to it like you would Siri or Alexa. It's utilizing the most recent version of ChatGPT, the 4.0 version. And that's giving you all of the historic information. Plus, because you've got Bing, it allows you to search for more current information on the web. One of the drawbacks is that Bing has what we call a token limit. And tokens are kind of, you can almost think of them as the amount of input and output that you get. They're not exactly words, because tokens are the way that it breaks down words into a digital language that it understands. But a simple way to think about it is basically one token equals 3/4 of a word. So 2,000 tokens would be about 1,500 words that you can put in and get out. So it ends up being on the shorter side of what we're going to see today. It does require you to have a Microsoft Edge browser. So if you're an Apple person like me, you might need to download that. But it has the ability also to generate visuals for you. So if you're doing a PowerPoint presentation and you need that perfect image of a purple squirrel with a gold tooth riding a motorcycle up the Eiffel Tower, it can create that image for you to use in your presentation. The GPT-4 model was trained, and they administered the bar exam. It was able to pass in the top 10%. So it's a pretty smart cookie, smarter than me for sure. Now, if we get to the middle, we're looking at the ChatGPT free version. This is sort of the OG that most people are working with. It's text input only, unless you're using the app, and you can use your voice there. And it's utilizing GPT 3.5, which is about 6 weeks older than GPT-4. But there are some differences. The first is the historic data. Its training is pre-January 22. So we are now May, of 24. This data is approaching being 2.5 years old. It has a token limit that is larger than Bing, but it's still about 4,096 input and output. The good thing, it's accessible for many browsers, so you could open it up on your phone or on your desktop or laptop. They did give GPT 3.5 the bar exam, and it passed, but it was in the lowest 10%. And when they administered the CPA exam, it actually failed this one. Now, there is a reason that it failed. We call these things large language models. It was not meant to be a computational model. which, if you're taking the CPA exam, there's going to be a bit of computation on there. That has now evolved a little bit. And as we turn to the one that is on the right, which is the premium version of ChatGPT, ChatGPT Plus, they have resolved some of these issues. This costs $20 a month. It is utilizing the 4.0 version. But with that, you get a maximum of 40 prompts in a 3-hour period, and then it kicks you into 3.5 until it resets. It's got a larger token limit, so you can put more in and get more out. And there's a few features that are only available in the Plus version. Yes, you get web browsing, so it's a little bit like Microsoft Bing, but you also get something called advanced data analytics that we're going to take a look at a little bit later. You have the ability to be able to create your own custom GPTs and shop for other people's GPTs on the GPT store. It also has what we call vision. So you can now upload images, not just text. And so it's become multimodal, where it can use different kinds of input. And the latest addition that is just rolling out this month is something called memory, where you can ask it to remember very specific things that you want it to use over all of your prompts in the future. Incidentally, you can also ask it to forget that, so you can wipe its memory if you want to. It did pass the bar in the top 10%, and this time it passed the CPA exam at 84%. So again, all of these using the same engine under the hood. Now, there are some different engines that are out there. Most notably on the left-hand side, Google, who everyone knew was going to play in this territory. In February of 23, they launched Google Bard. It was a little bit of a rocky start for them. And they have moved to a new model in February of this year called Gemini. There are both free and paid versions of Gemini. Again, voice or text input, and it's using a new model. It's evolved from using the Palm model to the Gemini model. Now, Google is a little bit mysterious. They don't tell us what their training date is. So it's a little tricky to know if there's been any kind of cutoff in their data. They like to say, hey, we're Google and we own search, and so we're constantly training our tool. But you still might find errors in the training history. One of the drawbacks of Bard was it had a very small token limit, so you could put very little in and get very little out. They haven't told us what the token limit is for Gemini, but I can tell you it's much larger than Bard ever was. Because it is Google, you can access the internet to pull current information. And one of the really cool things, if you work in the Google ecosystem, is that it can work across Google Workspace and apps. So you can ask it to go in and search your Google Gmail to find very specific information in your Gmail history, and then actually get it to organize that or to put it into Google Sheets or Google Docs. So it's a great way to work across that entire Google ecosystem. Last but not least, on the left-hand side is a model called Claude 3 from a company called Anthropic. It is free, but it has a limit on the number of free prompts that you can use, and then it blocks you from using it until the system resets. Text input only, and they haven't really shared much about what the model is. The historic data goes up to early 2023, so it's not quite up to date like ChatGPT Plus is. But here's where this model shines. It has a token limit of more than 100,000 tokens, which essentially means that you could put a 179-page book into this model. The output is still limited to about 4,096 tokens, but if you've got large pieces of data that you wanted to look at or to summarize, Claude 3 is a great tool. Again, ability to access from any browser, and you can attach files, up to 5. And so if you've got PDFs or other files that you wanted to look at, you can actually attach them. It is not connected to the internet. So when you're going to look for more recent information that is going to be after early 2023, you're a little bit out of luck. Just as many companies have been aligning themselves in the tech industry, we heard last week about Apple aligning themselves with ChatGPT. Amazon has aligned themselves very closely with Anthropic and with Claude 3 with a with a pretty big investment in that organization. So it'd be interesting to see the alliances as they change over the coming year. Now, if you can't decide what tool you want to use, there's actually one that combines all of them. It's called maxai.me. And for $16.99 a month, you get access to all of these different tools. I can't say that you have complete access to ChatGPT Plus, to some of the things like advanced data analytics, but it allows you to use the underlying model for all of these tools. So maybe something for you to consider if you're not sure exactly which one's going to be best for you. A quick note about traffic. So this is monthly web visits from desktop and mobile, basically since the AI explosion started at the end of November 22. Again, the reason I am talking about ChatGPT is when you look at where they are and you know that Microsoft Bing is using the same underlying model, they are in a clear leadership position. Bard had kind of a rocky start, never built the same critical mass. Now Gemini has come in. They've done a little bit better, but in terms of usage, they're still a bit further behind. Of course, AI is moving into the enterprise world. So in November, Microsoft did the rollout of Copilot with Windows 11, which now includes that Bing chat. So you've got GPT-4 that is involved with the Copilot system, and Microsoft is building it across the rest of their ecosystem so that you can do things like go into Microsoft Excel and use natural language to interact with Excel to have it pull up specific information for you. That's a trend that's going to continue. ChatGPT, not to be outdone, launched an enterprise system in August. And this allows companies basically to also protect their data behind a firewall. Company data is not being used to train the model, so there's an additional security layer there. And then there's companies that are out there like C3 AI that have a whole suite of AI applications that they're helping companies implement in the enterprise environment. For those of you who are new, I just want to spend a quick second taking a look at navigation and settings. So we're actually going to go into ChatGPT right now. As you can see, it's a very simple interface, very similar to what you might be used to in a web browsing. So the difference is that our search bar is kind of at the bottom, and here is where we're going to be entering our prompt. And so we're going to start just by creating a very simple prompt. Imagine that you are the poet Robert Frost, period. Please create a poem about Philadelphia in the month of May. And because I'm a slow typer, I just did that with my voice. So here we see that it has generated a poem in the style of Robert Frost about the month of May in Philadelphia. And so at the bottom, we see what we're going to see after every post. This gives us the ability for it to be read aloud to us. If we're in an environment where we can't read, we can copy that information. We can also regenerate it. So if we don't like what we saw for the first time, we can just click it and will give us a second answer. Here's where we can also give it information on the quality of the response. So we can click bad response, and we can either choose from what we didn't like about it, or if we want to put in a custom response, we can tell it exactly what it did wrong, and it's going to go back and it's going to train the model. But let's now take a look at regenerating it. If we didn't like that first version, it's now creating a second version. And the way that we can tell that it's a second version is down here. We see that it's version 2 of 2. And so if we can't remember what we did the first time around, we just click this and it goes back to number 1 and back to number 2. And it's even asked us if we liked version number 2 better, worse, or the same than version number 1, and that's going to help to train. Now, if we want to share, we can go up here and we can click this button, and it's going to allow us to create a link where we can send that link to someone and share our prompt with them. Also down here in the lower left-hand side, you're going to see your picture if you've registered. And you have the ability to go in and control your settings. So how it looks, what it's doing with your chats. There may be a few in here because I have the premium version. There may be a few that you won't see in yours, but you have things like data control, which you can turn on and off if you don't want to share your information with the system. You can export all of your data if you want to get all of it out and then delete everything that's in there. You can do that as well. So all of those things will be in your system control. That's a really basic navigation. We're going to take a look at some of the more advanced features later on in the presentation. I want to talk a little bit about security. Whether you're using ChatGPT or whether you're using Gemini or Anthropic, I encourage you to read their privacy policy. A lot of people very worried about what's happening with their data. What ChatGPT tells you is they are not selling their data. However, just like any of these tech companies, that doesn't mean they aren't collecting your information, right? And so what kind of information are they collecting? What are they doing? Are they sharing it? In some cases, yes, it is going to third-party vendors, not to market to you, but these are people that had helped them improve their product. A lot of folks are also worried about data being associated with them. And what ChatGPT explains is that they go through a process of depersonalizing your data so that the data actually will train the system, but it doesn't get associated with person X specifically. And they use the metaphor of, imagine you're kind of reading a book. And when you get done reading the book, you close the book and you put it on a shelf. And you may remember the main ideas from that book, but you don't remember every word in every chapter. And that's essentially what ChatGPT is doing as well. It's keeping the main ideas. It's not remembering every single word that is personalized to what you're doing. So now we're at part two. It all starts with a good prompt, and that old adage, garbage in, garbage out. The better you are at writing a prompt, the better you are at getting good results out of the system. So I'd like you to imagine that ChatGPT is a brand new intern coming into your company. That intern's gone to an Ivy League school. They are very anxious to please you and to do a great job for you. But you know what? They don't know you. They don't know your company. They don't know the problems that your business has or what your model might be exactly just yet. And so they need guidance. And so just like you wouldn't lock up an intern in a room for 2 months with a project, you need to give them those guardrails and those contexts that are going to help them achieve. And the same is true for prompting. And so there are 6 components that I talk about that I think are really important for you to be thinking about when you're doing your prompting. They're a little bit in order of importance here. And one caveat is you don't necessarily have to have all of them for every prompt that you write. In some cases you may, but you might also have cases where you only need 2, 3, or in some cases even 1 of these components. Those components are task, context, exemplar, persona, format, and tone. And so to talk about each one and how they impact how the model works, let's take a closer look. So task is the most important thing that you need to do. The model will not function unless you give it very specific directions. Typically, this is articulating what your end goal is, and they tend to start with action verbs, things like analyze, summarize, create, translate, simplify. To understand how this affects the way that the model and its neural network are working, let's start with this basic building block. We want it to research 3 cookie recipes. So now the language model is going out to its 3 billion parameters, 300 billion parameters, and looking at all of those. And as you can imagine, searching 300 billion parameters, it's going to find a lot of information. So you're going to get perhaps a sort of wide spectrum of answers on 3 cookie recipes. And this is where context comes in. Context is the way that you constrain the endless possibilities of the model. It's one of the trickier things to figure out because you can give it a lot of context, but you also want to be careful. These models have token limits, and you don't want to kind of use up all its memory by, feeding it too much information and not giving it enough memory to give you a good output. So the way I make sure that I've given it the right amount is ask myself the question, does it understand my background? Does it understand what success will look like for me and what environment I'm in? So now let's layer in context to that first prompt that we have. Research 3 cookies. We've added to that, I have a gluten allergy and I'm seeking a dessert that I can eat, right? So we've given it background, the gluten allergy background, and we've given it what success looks like. I want to be able to eat this thing. So you can now imagine it's narrowed down what it's going to look like substantially to gluten allergies that this person is going to be able to eat or gluten-free options. Next is exemplar. And quite frankly, AI models just work better when you give them examples to draw from. So as you're crafting your prompt, if you do have examples that are in mind, give it that framework, add it in. They're not required for every prompt that's out there, but it will help to get it into the ballpark that you want it, and also maybe help it to pre-visualize what you are looking for. So now we've added exemplar into our prompt. I have a gluten allergy and I'm seeking desserts that I can eat. Research 3 cookie recipes. Please include recipes by celebrity chefs, for example, Martha Stewart, Rachel Ray, etc. So now I'm expecting that included in that, I am now going to get recipes either from Martha Stewart or people that are going to be like her. Next is persona. Persona is giving the model a perspective of how we want it to think and work. It's who the person we want them to be. So instead of them just being generic AI, we can ask them to imagine that they are the managing director of a bank or a public relations specialist or a social media expert. And so that is the lens that you're going to get the model to look through versus a much broader generic AI lens. You can even pick people out there if you wanted to look through the lens of, Steve Jobs or Muhammad Ali or somebody like that. So now we've added that in at the top. I want you to act as a nutritionist advising me on healthy eating and macronutritional information. So that's the lens now that the model is looking through from a nutritionist. You can imagine that will be slightly different information than if we had left that off. Next is format. A lot of folks completely forget about format and they just type their prompt in and they take whatever ChatGPT gives them, which is usually paragraphs or bullet points. But believe it or not, it can do a lot more in formats. It can do tables like you would see in Excel, numbered lists, headings and subheadings, code blocks. It actually can write code for you and put it in that format. Mathematical notations. If you're writing a term paper, it can do citations in styles like APA or MLA, including hyperlinks. So try and pre-visualize what you want it to look like and include that format in your prompt so that it gives you the right output. Last but certainly not least, tone. How do you want it to sound? Tone typically are words that are adjectives or adverbs. Write this in a friendly style. Write this in a professional style. Write this in a humorous style, right? So you can imagine that the language that you get out of it is going to be very different, whether you choose it to be professional versus humorous. And so you can kind of start to control what that output looks like. So some tips for writing strong prompts. First of all, identify the purpose. Begin with the ends in mind. And once you have that picture in your mind, start to back into it and figure out what is the language model going to need in terms of information and instructions to get me to the finish line. Use simple language. You don't have to be a Shakespearean poet. In fact, being simple can be better for you. It's probably more important to be very specific. Being specific with the information, like we were in these practice prompts, does a lot more to guide it. One thing you want to avoid is asking the model multiple questions within one prompt, because ultimately it may get confused about what does this person want at the end of the day, and it may not give you the right answer. As we've shown, use examples and also avoid any kind of leading questions. Large language models tend to want to please you and please your ideology. And so they're very willing to follow you down a very specific rabbit hole if you lead them. So I would avoid doing that if you want to keep it neutral. Most importantly, test and iterate. Know that what you're going to get out the first time might not be optimal. You might need to rerun or regenerate that prompt or make a change to your prompt. And if you're not sure what kind of changes you need to make, perhaps ask questions about, have I given it enough information on the industry that I'm focused on? Might I need to supply it with some data to help it make a decision? Am I clear on my focus, my question, my topic, or my theme? Have I been clear on the constraint? So if you write a prompt and it gives you a phone book and you really only wanted 50 words, you might need to tell it, make it less than 50 words. Or conversely, if you need more detail, you might need to ask for a detailed explanation. Again, the structure, the format, is it giving you a table versus bullet points? Is that very clear? Have you communicated the key points or themes that you wanted it to consider? Any kind of original text that might help it? And very importantly, any kind of editing instructions. If you're having it edit something down, you might need to be very clear about how you want the editing done. So as you create your prompts, a couple things are happening. First of all, they are kept in a rolling list on the left side. This is a little bit like your browsing chat history. And what's really great about that is once you've used a prompt, you can actually go over and find it and reuse it so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you wanted to do the same function again. So often I'll relook up an old prompt that I had and change one or two things and rerun that older prompt. Now, if you don't want it, you can also delete them individually. And if you don't want anything remembered, you can clear and turn off the tab history in your settings. If you have history in there now and you turn this off, please note it will take about 30 days for all of them to clear from your queue. But by the time June rolls around, most of them should be gone. You also have the ability to change the prompts in terms of your naming convention. You can share them, and you can also delete them individually just by going to that window on the left-hand side, clicking the three dots, and that will pull up the editing features where, again, you can share, rename, or delete individual chats. So thank you, Rusty, for all this information on how to create prompts, but how will this really help me professionally? And I like to start with this question because there's so many things we can do with AI. The question really should be, what work needs to be done? That's a very different answer than what could AI do? Because it can do so many things, it doesn't do all of them really well. So I'm going to show you a few things that I do think it does well and some areas where it's stumbling a little bit, areas for you to keep in mind as you're integrating this into your workflow. So generically, whether you're in job search mode or whether you're working for a company, I think all of us at some point are doing some kind of research, and we can use ChatGPT to act as a research assistant for us. We can do it with prompts like this one. I want you to act as a corporate researcher. That's persona right there. I've told it the lens I wanted to look at. Tell me about the company Mary Kay. That's task. That's the task I wanted to execute. For example, how many employees do they have? What is their vision and mission? Who is their CEO? What NAICS codes are they registered under? Include other key information to help orient me to their business. All of that is exemplar. I've asked it and given it examples. Provide the information in bullet points. So you can see in this prompt, we've got 4 or 5 components of that prompting technique that are in there. And let's see what what ChatGPT came back with. Now, I selected Mary Kay because it's a company I worked for 8 years in their corporate brand development team. And so I knew it well, and I knew I could check the facts pretty well. And I was really pleased. You don't have to read all of this. Just know that as I was going through, it was really giving me the information I asked for, that it put it in the format that I wanted, that the information was really accurate, and that I was generally pretty happy. However, there was one problem that I ran into. The current CEO of Mary Kay is David Hall, who has been serving in this position in 2006. Now, remember, this is the free version of ChatGPT. The memory ended at the end of 2001, and so it didn't know that David Hall had retired at the end of 2022, and there was a new CEO. So as you're getting data from the system, one of the criteria you need to understand is all of this information going to be within the historical training window of the model? Things like personnel may have changed. Things like most updated sales information may have also changed. So in this case, I'm going to give the tool maybe a B or B minus for what it was able to do. It did a fantastic job of 30 seconds of pulling exactly the information that I wanted. So beyond this, I also used to teach that you could track a public company's historic growth and profit. So in this case, I'm going to demonstrate a few different things. Create a table comparing the following companies. So here's format. I start with the format and creating a table. Volkswagen, Toyota, Tesla show historic sales evolution from 2018 to 21 in US dollars. I asked for US dollars because Volkswagen is a European company and I needed to convert those dollars. In the rows, show each year, include columns for each year that show the gross margin and gross margin percentage. So a lot of formatting information I've given it. Let's see how it did. So, wow, ChatGPT gave me this table. It looks a lot like an Excel table. In fact, one of the cool things, if you ask for things in tabular form, is that you can then copy that information and drop it into Excel or Sheets and manipulate that data as CSV data. Now, I like how it did the formatting for me. And as I was checking the historic information, the sales for 18, 19, 20 looked pretty good for all companies. However, I noticed there was a problem with 2021. And remember, the cutoff date was December of 2021. And so it didn't get full year numbers that would have been announced in January of 2022. And so it made up its own numbers. This is called hallucinating. And so this is something you need to be very careful with. They are putting a lot of guardrails in place to keep this system from hallucinating going forward. And in fact, one of the guardrails is when I went to run this prompt now, ChatGPT no longer is providing historical financials. So they would give me the template, but they wouldn't fill it out because they didn't want it to have the wrong information. For me, this is the companies really trying to build trust, right? They know that if people aren't trusting their data, that in the future, they're not going to use it. And so they're getting better about flagging where the training data may be wrong and maybe serving up hallucinations or bad information. Now, if you've got queries that are involving numbers, a couple things that I would suggest for you. First of all, ask the model, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or whoever, what are your sources? And if they come back and they give you an answer that sounds like, as a large language model, I don't have specific sources, it's in my underlying training data, that is a red flag. Do not use that information because you don't know what that source is. If it comes back and says, this information was extracted from 10Ks, from annual reports, from analyst reports, you may be getting better information. You can also regenerate the response. So take a note of the numbers that it gave you the first time around, and then hit that regenerate button and check to see if it gave you the same numbers the second time around. If it did, that probably means it's not guessing, because when it guesses, it doesn't give you the same number on its second guess. It will make up something completely new for you. So a word for the wise, when you're using numbers, use it with caution, especially if it is beyond the training horizon. One thing that you can use, especially with your own data for, is giving it curated information. And this is new for some of the people who haven't seen my presentation before, or who have seen my presentation before. I haven't talked about this. So you have the ability now to feed it information. And for those of you who are using the free tool, I'm going to show you how to do it in bite-sized pieces so that you don't go over the token limit. What's really cool about this is you can actually have it compare two different pieces of information. So not just analyze one thing, but give it two things and look at both of them together. And we're going to do this through something that's called chain of thought prompting. Most people do something that we call zero-sum prompting. They ask one question, they get one answer, and that's as far as the prompt ever goes, versus actually having a back and forth conversation to reveal more information from the system. So I'm actually going to open up a link. We're going to go on to this. And so what I have done here, you see the prompt at the top. Imagine you are a financial analyst. Please review the following two analyst reports and summarize key elements such as performance, valuation, et cetera, et cetera. That's where our example comes in. I will give them to you one at a time. After you receive the second report, please highlight the historical evolution of the analyst perspective. So here I'm telling it, I'm going to give it to it one at a time, and that's where you break the big thing down into smaller pieces so that it can digest them. So ChatGPT said, got it. Please go ahead and give me the information. I'm going to give it the first report here, which is about 4 pages in total length. Got all of the analyst information, and then it comes back and provides a little bit of a summary for that information. Then it says, would you like to proceed with the second analyst report? I drop that bite-sized piece of information in there. Again, it's going to give me its top line analysis of that. And now what's cool is I can go and I can interact with those two documents. I can say, highlight the evolution of the stock price and Morgan Stanley's price target. And so it is able to go into a PDF and actually extract that information from the PDF from me. So showing, where it was, where it's moved to. Let's see, anything else that I've got in this one? I think that's it. So you're giving it the curated data, and you are now using it to ask the specific questions that you want to look for. So we're going to jump back to our presentation now. You can use ChatGPT to actually create SWOTs for you. For those of us who do strategy, SWOTs, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we all know that. Whether we're doing it for our company, whether we're doing it for our competitors, or maybe it's for a vendor that we're getting ready to audit, and we want to understand maybe some of the risks or liabilities that they have. So in this case, ChatGPT, please create a SWOT in tabular form for JCPenney's. Again, I've given it format, tabular form, and somehow ChatGPT knew that it could put it in a 2x2 box for me. And so it's given me, again, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And here's where I can use that chain of thought prompting technique to dig further. I start at the 25,000-foot level with the SWOT, and then maybe I pick something like one of the weaknesses, struggles with declining sales and profitability, and I ask it to dig a little bit deeper. Why does it say this? What are its sources? Maybe I'm going to need to then go into the 10K and dig a little bit into the 10K to understand, is that a geographic issue or one of their business units, etc. You can also get it to brainstorm your personal branding. So we're all on a Zoom meeting today. Many of us do these where we get on and there's 50 people on a Zoom call. Everybody does their introduction. And by the time you get to the 15th person, you can't remember what the first person said and anything interesting about them. So ChatGPT can actually help you to do different kinds of brainstorming. So in this case, I've said, pretend to be a career coach, helping me to craft 5 creative and unique branding statements. So anytime you want ChatGPT to do brainstorming, don't ask it to do one thing. Ask it to do multiple ideas for you. 5 is a great number. 10, it could actually do. If you get above 10, the token limit might give you some weaker answers, but 5 to 10 should be great. So in this case, I said create these branding statements. They should begin with I am, I do, or I help. Each one should be less than 10 words and should focus on the following skills. And here's where you are going to drop in your own superpowers, those things that you know make you unique, or maybe the things that your boss told you make you unique and stand out from everyone else out there. So I put my superpowers in there. We'll see what ChatGPT came back with, 5 answers. And as I look at all of these, they look to be less than 10 words. Some of them were good, some of them were not so good. And so if you don't like the first round, you just hit that regenerate button and you'll get another set of brainstorming ideas. So the first one I wasn't quite comfortable with. I am the marketing maven who creates buzz. I honestly couldn't see myself saying that on a Zoom meeting with a straight face. Some of the other ones get a little bit better. Number 3, I help business grow by integrating tech and consumers. Yeah, that was kind of closer to me. But as I got to number 5, I do more than follow trends. I set them. That's actually become my branding statement. So if you get on a Zoom meeting with me, that is my tagline. I do more than follow trends. I make them. And so you can integrate your superpowers and ChatGPT's creative juices to craft that unique branding statement for you. While we're talking about these Zoom meetings, a lot of time people are dropping in their contact details. Maybe it's their LinkedIn address, email, phone number. It gets dropped into the chat and lots of people save the chat. Well, you can automate all of that in an extraction at the end. You can ask ChatGPT to pull out the following from the Zoom chat meeting: the name, the industry, LinkedIn profile address, etc. Put it in tabular form, and then you feed it the notes from the chat text. And what it's really good at is organizing it right into a nice little table like that for you. Again, you can cut and paste that table and put it into your Excel tracking document or wherever you are keeping track of all of your contacts. Analyzing emerging industry trends. So maybe you're in job search and you're looking to change industries and you know nothing about the industry you're going into. Maybe your business is looking to go into a new sector or a new product category and you need to do some research. You can use trends like prompts like this one. I want you to act as a clean energy industry consultant. Please identify 3 top trends in clean energy technology in the United States. Please cite your sources. Please do not hallucinate. Please put these in bullet point format. So anytime you want to make sure that you are not getting any BS or hallucinations out of the system, you can add words like please cite your sources or hallucinate to see what it comes back with. So in this case, it gave me 3 different trends on clean energy. And again, here's where you can use that technique of starting at the 25,000 foot level and then go in and drilling a little bit further. So in this case, chain of thought prompting, please expand on point number 3, highlighting specific examples, including names of companies or organizations that are leading this trend and examples of the products or services that they provide. So now I can start to drill down and sound a lot more like a subject matter expert. You can ask it to analyze and create output from 2 different resources. So in this case, analyzing a resume against a job description. I want you to act as a corporate recruiter. I'm going to give you a resume and a job description. I want you to compare the 2 and identify any synergies and gaps that should be explored. Do you understand? So here I'm going to break it into bite-sized pieces. It's going to say yes. I then feed it piece number 1, the job description, and then feed it piece number 2, my resume. And it's going to come back and it's going to show here's where the alignment is and here's where potential gaps are. Well, I wanted to run a little experiment, and I ran that original job description through a tool called JobScan. JobScan kind of matches to see how closely your resume matches the ATS system and the job description. And when I ran it through initially, I was getting a score of 39, so pretty weak. But then what I did was use ChatGPT not to rewrite my whole resume. I used it like a scalpel to go in and work on very specific parts of my resume. So now that it has my job description and resume, I asked it to identify the top 8 key headline words and put them into order of importance. So now if someone is scanning my resume, I know that I've got the top 8 most important words included. And hopefully it's going to be looking at that job description and your resume to make sure that you have the ones that are included in there. The next step, so when I did that, it moved my score from 39 up to 51%. So then I went in and said, based on the job description, please suggest key experiences and achievements that I need to highlight, maybe things I need to put into the first bullet point of a job versus them being the last bullet point. And when I did that, I moved my score from 51 to 60. Now, after I've done all that, I've gone in and said, based on this job description, my strengths and any gaps, how should I customize my professional summary in 60 words or less? If you want, you can also add in, make sure that you bring in this experience. So if there's something that's happening on page 2 of your resume and you want to make sure it gets seen, you can ask it to integrate that. And when I did that, it moved the score up to 72. So by doing this at the end of the day, I was able to move my score from being a 39 up to 73 just by being, very tactical with using it on specific parts of my resume. You can
Rusty,
now
I
also
don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to give you a 15-minute heads up. I know folks may have some questions.
Perfect.
So I just want to let you know we're 15 minutes out.
Okay, perfect. We should be close on timing, but I'll move it along. You can also have it write a cover letter based on your job description and resume. So here I've asked it to write a cover letter of less than 275 words using the job description and resume. And here's what it came back with. And now you might look at that and say, wow, that's much too long. I'd never want anything that long as a cover letter. Well, here's the cool thing. You can just ask it to shorten it by a certain percentage, 50%, or make it 150 words. And it's going to keep the most important context for you. If you don't like the language, you're going to have the ability to change the voice style and tone as well. And we're going to take a look at that coming next. Most importantly, you want to double check for errors, tweaks, and to do a little bit of personalization. So in this case, it looked at the job description, which required 10 years of experience for a certain skill. And I actually had more than 20 years of experience, but it defaulted to the job description. So it said I only had 10 years. So you want to look for those kind of errors. And just like a good chef adds a little bit of salt and pepper to the dish, you need to be doing the same thing. You need to be acting as the editor. So one of the big concerns out there is, gosh, if everybody is using ChatGPT to write everything is going to start sounding the same. So I want to show you how you can control that and change that. And we're going to use a little Philadelphia example here. We're going to take the preamble from the Declaration of Independence written by Thomas Jefferson back in 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with their creator, by their creator, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A very beautiful singular sentence written over 200 years ago. Now we're going to ask ChatGPT to reimagine that 200 years later in the style, tone, and voice of Mr. Barack Obama. So immediately we can start to see that the language, first of all, there's much more. Instead of it being one sentence, it's actually 3 sentences long now. We see the language that's very inclusive. We come together today. That's very much Barack Obama. And if you were to read this, you would actually think, yeah, that could have come out of Barack Obama's press secretary. But let's take this a step further and take a look at Mr. Barack Obama's successor, former President Donald J. Trump. How would he write this? Well, look at that now. Listen, folks, nobody knows the Declaration of Independence better than me. Believe me, it's tremendous, really tremendous. It's not 3 sentences, it's actually 16 different sentences. But if you look at the context, it's still containing all of the basic elements. So to end our exercise today, we're going to take someone else famous from Pennsylvania. Does anyone have any ideas who that might be? Well, actually, I chose this guy, Philadelphia born and raised, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Mr. Will Smith. And so if we look at how Will Smith would interpret that Declaration of Independence, we can see the language that he used. My point is 4 very different authors. The context is still the same. The language, the tone, and the style is very different. Now you can teach the language, the model to follow your language. And the way you're going to do that is you actually ask ChatGPT to learn your writing style. And then you're going to give it a piece of your content. This could be a great cover letter that you've written in the past or something that you think is indicative of your style, and have it analyze. It's going to give you this output. And what you can then do is do a follow-up prompt to say, now write in this style. Now, you don't want to have to do that every time. So what you can do is copy and paste that output on your style and come over to custom instructions. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to click on your settings. You're going to go to custom instructions, and you're going to see 2 boxes. The one at the top, you don't really have to worry about. It's asking for some basic information about you. But the box that's at the bottom is how you would like ChatGPT to respond. And so you can add that custom instructions, how you want it to write, so that it kind of writes in your language. You can turn this on and off. So if you don't always want it to write in your language, it won't do that. But that's one of the ways that you can start to make it sound a bit more like you. You can ask it to do things in the interviewing process, like interview directly based on that job description that you've given it. You can ask it to brainstorm common interview questions for your role or industry, or you can ask it to create star stories for you. This is a bit more complex prompt here, but one of the things that's cool is you can give it context by asking ChatGPT to ask you questions first. So here I'm asking it to help me create star stories, and I'm asking it to ask me 5 distinct questions to gather information from me and then summarize that and create the final narrative. So whether you want a star response for a job interview, or whether you are working on your annual performance review and you want a star story for that, you can use a star story prompt to do so. We're going to go into some of the advanced features of ChatGPT Plus now. I'm going to move quickly through these. I mentioned that there's something called advanced data analysis. ChatGPT has always been great with language. They sort of the William Shakespeare of working with text and language, but not so good with numbers. It used to fail basic math. I talked about that CPA exam. Well, that's changed a little bit with advanced data analysis, which really is kind of added Sir Isaac Newton combined with William Shakespeare. So it's now great with numbers, great with analytics. What can it do? It can do data analysis on your data set. It can clean that data set. It can visualize that data set. It can take key takeaways and summarize those for you. It can do extractions from PDFs. It can convert files from one format to another format for you, or turn a GIF into a video, or even generate QR codes. These are all of the different file formats that it supports. You can ask it to create or work with any of these files going forward. I want to show you a quick example of how I tested this last summer when it came out. I wanted to see if it could analyze 60,000 cells in a data table, create 10 data visualizations, and generate a downloadable PowerPoint file in under 5 minutes. So I went in and I enabled data analysis. I attached my Excel chart, and then I wrote this simple prompt. Please give me 10 visuals to understand this data. And we're going to take a look now at a video. This has been sped up 5 times to see what it's doing. It's doing the analysis to understand what are the fields in my data, what are the ways that it can visualize the data, and what are giving me explanations of what those data visualizations are. Behind the scenes, it's writing all of its own Python code to do this data visualization. Now I've said, please create a downloadable PowerPoint file for each of these visuals at a slide. It's done that, and it's created a link. And when I click on the link, I have a PowerPoint file with all of the different slides. And of course, all of the explanation for those slides are in the earlier presentation. I'm going to skip over this in the essence of time. This is another example where I loaded 2 10K annual reports. I just wanted to give you a sense of the size. The Sally Beauty report was 114 pages. The Ulta Beauty was 105 pages. So pretty hefty documents. And once I loaded them in, I was able to compare the two of them. I was able to ask very specific questions and get it to do calculations about things that were in cash flow statements or the balance sheet. And I was able to do this again in ChatGPT Plus Advanced Data Analysis. ChatGPT now has the ability to see. It is multimodal, so you can do things like upload an image. In this case, I kind of gave it an abstract bicycle that was all broken into pieces. And yes, it was able to figure out it was a bicycle that was broken, but I was also able to include a follow-up prompt to say, give me step-by-step instructions how to repair this from a picture, include the required parts and tools, and it was able to build step-by-step instructions for my repair. It can do the same thing, not only with bicycles that are broken, but with charts that you give it. It can analyze the data in the picture of the chart. Late last year, they introduced something called custom GPT. So this is your ability to go in and create your own GPT using the underlying model and your own data, and to use that almost like an app. And all of these have been assembled, if you want to have it assembled, on the GPT store. The GPT store looks a little bit like this, kind of like your standard app store that's out there. And you can actually go in and for free search to see if anyone has created a GPT to tackle a specific task. Maybe it's pulling information off of Travelocity on web flights, or in my case, I went in and took a look at what are the ones that are associated with job search. What are they able to do and help with job search activities? So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of custom GPTs that are on there. I also was able to create my own, and I don't do any coding. I was able to use natural language for all of this. I was able to train it on me, where I uploaded my own custom resume, master resume, that was not 3 pages long, but that was 18 pages long. So it knew everything about me, along with things like my Clifton strengths and my LinkedIn profile. And so now when I give it a job description, it knows a lot more information about me and is able to help me customize things a lot better. So folks, we are at the end of the presentation, are going to go into question and answer now. What I want to let you know is you can get all of the prompts that you saw today by using this QR code or going to the link that is on that screen. I'm going to leave this up while we do the Q&A, and you should be able to download those and cut and paste and use them right away. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to the Beacon team. I know we're getting close to the end, but in the 5 minutes or so we have left, any questions that you're seeing?
So there were a couple of questions throughout the presentation, a decent number of ones you did answer, but I can ask just a couple, and then if anyone wants to chime in with their own questions, you're welcome to do so as well. So there was a question about, I guess, figuring out the year of the information that the service you're using is pulling from and how to make sure that the years are up to date. And I know you showed that example where now the information won't fill in, but I guess the question would be, how do you determine that information?
Believe it or not, it will just tell you. So if you go to ChatGPT and just tell me what is your training date or when did your training end, it will come back and it will give you an honest answer, both whether you're using the free version or the paid version. I think you stumble a little bit when you get to Gemini. Again, they're not telling you the training date. They will probably be a little bit more vague with the kind of answer that they give you. So in that case, that's an area where you're probably going to need to go in and do your own data verification when you get a response from them.
Thank you. We did have a question that was earlier on that may have been answered in your final discussion of the AI having sort of eyes, but there was a question that was, does ChatGPT or others create or imagine new illustrations asked of it?
So ChatGPT Plus includes DALL-E, and DALL-E is a stable diffusion image generator that allows you to put an idea in, and it will create a picture for you. Bing Chatbot also has that ability to create an image. Gemini from Google, they launched with an image generator, but they were having some issues with it creating some content that was not, shall we say, historically correct. And so they dialed back that image generator. I'm not sure if it's back to being fully available or in limited availability.
Thank you. And then the other big one from our chat was, do you have any additional tips for protecting personal information while still maximizing your benefits of using an AI platform?
So if you're working in an enterprise environment, so from a company perspective, first of all, if you're on an open tool that is not behind the firewall of your company, err on the side of caution. Do not put any sensitive data that is might put you or your job in jeopardy. If you're within the enterprise environment and there is a firewall, then you're probably fine, but always check with your IT department to understand that. If you're using it personally, again, some of the things you can do in settings are turning off its training model so that it is not remembering your prompts at all. Erasing all of the prompts that you have so that any history that you have in there. And if you want to take it a step further, you don't even have to sign up for an account. You can use the generic interface that they have that doesn't require email. When you do that, of course, it's not going to remember any of your information. If you type a prompt in, you won't be able to go back to that prompt in the future. So.
Wonderful, thank you. If anyone else on the call has some questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and you can ask your question.
Just some other resources for y'all to consider. If you want to continue with your training, lots of great, specifically hard skill dedicated courses on places like Udemy, LinkedIn Learning. I did check, and the Philadelphia Library System offers you free access to LinkedIn Learning, so you can get courses there as well. some great YouTube channels to stay up on AI, Matt Wolf, AI Advantage. And if you're really looking to understand all the new tools that are hitting the market, there is an aggregator out there. It's a website called there's an AI for that.com. And all these new tools get added. You can just go and type in a discussion like job search or like internal audit, and it will pull up all the latest AI tools, not just ChatGPT, but all the latest AI tools that are available for that.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.